a record 4 million Americans reaching retirement age in 2024, people are going to begin to need to rethink longevity when it comes to the retirement lifestyle. Here to talk with me is Cyrus Bamji from the Alliance for a Lifetime Income. How are you doing today, Cyrus?
Hey, well, thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
So, I guess just getting started, one thing I was wondering about was what is retirement going to look like with this many people reaching the traditional retirement age of 65 all at once?
Sure. Well, as you know, we just put out a research study. It's our annual research study, a pretty big major research study, basically about the state of retirement security for millions of Americans out there, and what's changed, what's not. And there's basically good news and bad news out there. The bad news is that about 51% of consumers in what we call this peak 65 age, and peak 65, by the way, I should say, is what's coming in 2024. We're less than a year away from it, when the most number of Americans will be reaching what we call traditional retirement age of 65 than ever before in our history. After that, in 2025 and beyond, that number gets smaller. So it's a critical juncture for us. And the fact of the matter is that, the majority of Americans aren't prepared. They feel like they don't have enough income for retirement that's going to last. And that's kind of the bad news. In fact, 32% of those Americans, those same Americans, don't feel confident about having enough to cover their basic monthly expenses in retirement, which is kind of scary and unfortunate. There is good news. More are turning towards some type of protected income for their retirement plans, and adding more protected income through annuities in their retirement plans. And we can talk a little about what that means and how it is. So there is some good news in here in terms of that.
Like, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more on, I guess, annuities. Like, one thing we're wondering is what makes an annuity right for somebody and what makes it not right for somebody?
Sure. Happy to. First of all, they're not for everybody. Let's just state that out there. I think it helps to understand why they're so essential for so many out there, and understand the context of how retirement planning and retirement plans have changed, and/or our approach and culture to it has changed over the past 30, 40 years. The fact is that 30, 40 years ago, there was a three-legged stool of retirement security, basically. You had a pension through your company, which is a type of protected income. You had Social Security, some type of Social Security, and then you had your savings, whatever you had done, were smart about in terms of your savings. Well, the fact of the matter is, today, fast forward 40 years, that third leg of the stool has kind of collapsed, which is pensions. Most people do not have pensions today, certainly in the private sector market. In the public sector, government, a number of nonprofits still do offer it and still do provide it, but most Americans just don't have it anymore. That's what's created this issue. Simultaneously, because pensions started to disappear in corporate America, we shifted to what we call the defined contribution system, which is basically 401ks and 403bs, where the company would offer a retirement savings plan called a 401k. You invested in certain funds, in certain investments in the market, and that shift from defined benefit, which was pensions, to defined contribution, was the loss of protected income through those pensions. And that has happened slowly and kind of silently over the past 30, 40 years. So today, fast forward now, a lot of people do have 401ks and do have those type of plans, but those plans are invested in the market, where you are at the mercy of growth and hopefully those markets going up, unlike what's been going on over the past 12 to 24 months now in terms of the volatility and stuff, where your money hasn't grown and actually we're seeing down markets. So with that loss of some type of guaranteed or protected income, it's created this kind of perfect storm. Four things that I think I'd like to say are important about what we call this this perfect peak 65 storm. Number one, we're living longer than ever before, which is great news, obviously. But now that retirement money that we've saved in whatever way, shape, or form, that money also has to live longer. Number two, as I mentioned, this economic uncertainty out there right now, down markets, high inflation. And high inflation really hurts retirees, unlike just about anyone else, primarily because they don't have an income coming in anymore from a paycheck, from work. And the money that they've saved in there is now less, so they can't withdraw and use that income from that portfolio as much. And that high inflation, your money just doesn't go as far as it used to. So that's the second thing, this economic uncertainty that we're living in. And number three, the uncertainty, unfortunately, with Social Security, which is the penultimate safety net, right? Financial safety net for retirees has been around for generations now. The problem is that there's so much discussion about the solvency of Social Security that the PRIP research that we have today shows that only 1 in 5 Americans in this 61 to 65 group are confident in the solvency of Social Security. In other words, only 1 in 5 believe that Social Security is going to be there for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Now, that may not necessarily be true, and there's plenty of evidence to say that Social Security will be there, but it may not be there as much as it's paying out today in terms of the people that are going to retire today and or into the future. So that number 3 is Social Security uncertainty. And then 4, fewer than half of Americans age 61 to 65 have protected income, as I was mentioning earlier, from a pension or annuity. When the peak 65 generation entered the labor market back in about 1980, 60% of private sector workers had a pension plan, and today it's only 4%. So you can see these 4 things are kind of making up what we call this perfect peak 65 storm for people planning on retiring now, next year, or the year after.
One thing I was wondering through all that is, you mentioned how pensions are one leg of the stool that are falling away. And you say that it can be realistic to believe that Social Security will be around for maybe in the next 10 to 20 years. But as a young person myself, looking even further down the road, 30, 40 years, can that be a leg of the stool that breaks?
No one has a crystal ball on this. I would tell you, I spent many years working at an organization called AARP. AARP, as you well know, represents tens of millions of older Americans out there, and one of their biggest objectives is to make sure that Social Security, through Congress, the administration, whoever it may be, for generations now and generations to come, is solvent and is secure and will be there. It's a promise that is made to all of us, including yourself, as you well know. The promise is that you pay into Social Security through your employer in some way, shape, or form through taxes, and that's saved in there for those Social Security payouts when you do retire, so that you know there's at least some type of money available. So I don't think that Social Security is going to go away. I know there's a lot of fear with it out there, but there is a good likelihood that there are going to be changes to the system that Congress will make in order to make the Social Security system more solvent. And there are a variety of different proposals on the table to make it more solvent. But I think that future retirees, yourself included, should know that there is a good likelihood that those payouts of what you expected and what's being paid out to Social Security recipients today may be lower in years to come. So, that's probably the worst case scenario. One other thing about Social Security, and this is the key part of this, Michael, that people don't realize, it only covers about, at best, 40% of your pre-retirement income. There's a huge gap over there of 60%. So just for lack of a better example over here, if it was, if you were earning $100,000 right before you retired in some way, shape, or form, and this is rather simplistic, but just as an example, you could only expect about $40,000 out of Social Security in retirement. It's not an exact formula, trust me, but that's the example over there. And people think that Social Security is going to be there to cover their lifestyle that they want, right? But it isn't. It is literally created and was created only as a stopgap safety net. That's why it's called a safety net, so that people don't fall into complete poverty out there. So realize that you cannot rely on Social Security alone, even if it's solvent, even if you're getting the same types of payouts indexed to inflation the way it is today. It's still not going to be enough if you want to continue living the life that you want and living the type of retirement that you want. You're going to have to scale back dramatically if you're relying on it for your lifestyle, bottom line.
And in your piece that you wrote for Retirement Daily, you did mention that in decades past, your parents were able to rely on an annuity in their retirement. What made them choose that?
Well, that's a long story, but the short version of it is this. My father actually worked for a life insurance company abroad, a British life insurance company called Norwich Union, for about 40 years. And so he's very wary and very understanding of what annuities are and where they fit into retirement plans. But I will say this, he was conservative. He invested well. He and my mom invested well in the markets to have a comfortable retirement using just their savings. But he also understood the risks of living longer and that money has to last 20, 30, 40 more years once they had retired. So before they retired to this country, he had the option of actually, and this is an interesting point, his company offered a pension. When he was about to retire, his company, Norwich Union, gave him the option of you can keep the pension and you'll get the payouts from the pension, or you can convert that pension into an annuity. And he decided to convert that pension into a private sector annuity, which could be taken just about anywhere that he wanted. And of course, they came over here to the US for it. That, bar none, and they didn't have Social Security, as I mentioned in the story over there, because they didn't live and work here in the US and came here for retirement. So they couldn't rely on that safety net. They needed another safety net, and that safety net was the annuity. That enabled them to live the life that they want over here in retirement, do the things that they wanted to do, for basically they're both past now, but about 25, 30 years that they lived over here in retirement. So, and that money was there all through those years.
Was there anything else that you'd like to bring up in this that I didn't prompt on?
No, I don't think so. I think you asked this question about the future retirement generations flying without a safety net, right?
Yeah.
Are annuities going to be around, for you and or others? And there's no question, people don't realize annuities actually are probably one of the oldest financial products in the world. They go back to the Roman times, when the word annuity actually comes from the root word annum, which is annual, standing for annual, and it was the Romans provided an annuity as retirement security for their soldiers once they retired, knowing that they needed money to be able to live on once that paycheck from being a soldier stopped. So they've been around a long, long time, and obviously they're still here today in different forms and in different ways. There are a variety of different types of annuities. But the bottom line message over there is that it is a product that has provided retirement security to literally hundreds of millions of people for centuries. And so I don't think, as a matter of fact, that it's something that's going to be gone for future generations. Quite on the contrary. I think based on what we were just talking about, the need for protected income becoming even more important in the coming years, I think more and more people are going to realize that they need to include some type of annuity or protected income within their retirement plan in order to have that floor, in order to supplement Social Security so that they can live the life that they want. When that paycheck continues to come, it's a personal paycheck versus your work paycheck, there's a lot of comfort in that, knowing that it's always going to be there, whether it's $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month, depending on what type of annuity you have, that's going to help you live and cover those basic expenses that you have in retirement. So, that's what I would say about future generations. I think rest assured that, it'll be around.
All right. Thank you so much, Cyrus. That's all the questions I had. But
Great.
appreciate you being here to speak today. And
Pleasure.
all right.
Thanks.